Hi, I'm Brian Van from SportBikeTrackGear.com, and today we're going to do an install video on our full Bazzaz traction control, quick shift, and self-mapping system on the 2013 STG project bike. I chose to go with Bazzaz because I really feel that when it comes to fuel controllers, I think it's the best product out there right now. I've used it on a bike previous. It's worked flawlessly. It's a 2008. It's worked flawlessly season after season. I've been impressed with its performance and its longevity. So for that reason, we're going to put it on this bike. Give you a quick look at it. Here is the module. It's the full TC kit, which is cool, and it's going to work well per Bazzaz with the stock TC on this bike, because all you have to do is either turn off the TC from the Bazzaz or turn off the stock TC. One or the other can be on, or they can both be off if that's your preference. So they can coexist on the same motorcycle, only one of them can be on at the same time. The instructions that it comes with, we've got color photos. They appear to be laid out pretty well. That's something we're not gonna know how good these really are until we get into this project. I am gonna tell you this is a pretty advanced project. I say that because we're gonna have to do a little wiring, right? And we're gonna have to gain access to many different areas on this bike. The fuel tank and airbox both need to come off. The tail needs to come off. We need to be able to have access to all the wiring in that area, okay? So this is more of an advanced project. Don't leave something like this to the last minute, not when you're heading to the track on the weekend. You're gonna start on Thursday to install this. Give yourself some time because it is a fair spot of work. Give you a quick look at some of the other pieces that are gonna be going on. Here is the self-mapping kit right here. Essentially what we have, right? We have an oxygen sensor along with the self-mapping module. Here is the quick shift sensor that goes right in the rod. They do supply with this kit a brand new rod. You can trim it to fit. We'll show you that as we go. And then over here, the wiring. Look at the harnesses. There is a ton of spaghetti that we got to route inside this bike, and here is the traction control as well as the map switch that we're going to install. When we come back, I'm going to have the fuel tank, the airbox, and the tail removed to gain access. We've already kind of showed you that stuff. There's no need to show you that again. Okay, per the instructions, the first thing that we're going to do is tear everything apart. We've done that, right? Now, we want to position the control module in the back of the tail section. I'm not going to fasten this down right now, right? We're going to use some Velcro or maybe some zip ties. We'll do that once I've got the harness routed. The next step is to get the fuel control harness, which is going to be the larger of the two. We need to connect that to the module here, route it down the left side of the bike per the instructions, and then we're going to connect the fuel injectors, the lower fuel injectors, those are the ones that are actually on the throttle bodies, to this harness right here. I'm gonna go ahead and stretch the harness out a little bit, right? It's been coiled up for a little while in the packaging. Make it a little bit easier to work with. Connect it here in the back. One of the things that is truly impressive about the Bazzaz product line is the quality of the wiring and the connectors used. This stuff reminds me a lot of the OE connectors that you'll find both on this motorcycle as well as on an automobile. I spent a lot of time wrenching on Cadillacs, and these connectors really remind me a lot of OE quality. We're going to go ahead and disconnect our lower fuel injectors like so. Push the release tab. Remember, be patient. You don't want to break anything here. Push the release tab and then pull back. You shouldn't have to force these. They should come undone relatively easy if you have the release tang firmly depressed. There's two sides to this. This is going to connect to the fuel injector itself. This is going to connect to the OE harness. Pretty easy to do at the end of the day. We're going to repeat this process for each of the four injectors. And as you go through this, really take your time and make sure you have everything routed nicely. You're going to want to listen for good positive engagement on each and every one of these connectors. You can hear it audibly click. when you push it in all the way, and you can feel the seal compress as well. I'm going to go ahead now and get this connected to the fuel injectors. Okay, next step is we need to get to the TPS sensor on the left side of the bike. You're going to see a couple of sensors on this bike, right? You're going to see one over here on the right side. You're going to see one on the left. They clearly call out the left side. We need to disconnect the connector, cut back the sheathing a little bit. We need to find the white wire and the blue wire. Anytime they call out a color on a wire that has a secondary color to it, remember the dominant color, the most prominent color is going to be the first color called. The second color is going to be the stripe on the wire. So in this case, it's going to be a black wire with a blue stripe. Let's go ahead and get that TPS disconnected on the left side of the bike. Once again, push in on the release tab. This one's kind of tucked away down here a little bit, so be patient with it. Push the release tab, get it out, pull it to the side a little bit. I've got a razor blade here I'm going to use to slice that protective sheathing. Quick safety note here, remember anytime you are slicing anything, always slice away from your body. Roll that up like so. Expose the wires. Here is the black with the blue that we're looking for, right? And right here is the white. I'm going to kind of position these so I've got easy access. They supply Scotch lock connectors, okay? Very easy to use. All we need to do is position the wire in between these two tangs, and then we're going to roll this over and crimp it down. This cuts the wire coating, right? And then these metal points are going to make contact with the wire, and then the clip on the harness side here plugs in. You've got a good solid connection. These are done that way on my other bike. It's been that way since 2008, and it's worked fantastically. I'm going to go ahead and begin here with the white one, and I also want to position these so that they are not facing the frame side, okay? The connector release tang is frame side, so we want these to face the other side. You just want to make sure you're going to have ample room for everything here. Go ahead and slide that in place. Roll the tab over like so. And then just compress until you hear it click, like so. It's going to take a little bit of force to push down, and then roll it so it's facing this direction. Let's grab another one, repeat the process on the black wire with the blue stripe, like so. Roll that over and compress, and there you have it. We can actually grab a pair of side cutters now. I'll trim away some of the sheathing. Like so. There's really nothing that's going to be in the way of rubbing the wires. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and plug that back in. I don't really feel the need to do any extra insulating with the wires. It looks like we're going to be good to go. Now, per the instructions, we need to plug the gray wire from the Bazzaz harness side into the black blue. Just make sure you seat it all the way, and then we need to plug the blue wire into the white. Okay, we're going to cover some ground now. We're going to finish the installation of the fuel harness. The first thing that we have to do is we need to connect the secondary fuel injector harness, the Bazzaz harness side to the factory harness. Remember, we don't have the airbox on the bike right now, so those injectors are not on the bike. So we're only going to be able to connect half. This will then plug in to the airbox. Next up is the factory crank sensor, right? Per the instructions, we've located it here. Harness side, we need to put a Scotch lock on the gray wire. Let's go ahead and grab another Scotch lock. It's a little tighter down here, so this may be hard for me to really get you guys good access to see what I'm doing, but at the end of the day, we're doing the same thing that we did with the TPS, right? We're just installing the Scotch lock. Take your time here and make sure you get a good connection. Like I said, it is definitely a little tight down here. Go ahead and roll that over. Squeeze until you hear a click. Okay, we've got that Scotch lock on. We need to install the green wire from the Bazzaz fuel harness. I'm going to go ahead and route this in a way that looks like it made sense. Remember, we're going to spend some time really tightening this up here when we're done. Let's go ahead and get that locked in place, like so. Next up is going to be the factory speed sensor. It is located inside of this hood right here. This is just a protective hood that covers multiple connectors. Okay, let's go ahead and expose our speed sensor connector like so. Go ahead and push that back, give you a look at that. Once again, push the release tang. We've got our two ends here from the Bazzaz unit. Go ahead, this is an inline style connector. Listen for that good positive engagement once again. Okay, we've got the speed sensor done. Next up is going to be the ground lug for the Bazzaz system. We're going to actually use the factory ground right here on the motor. We've got a nice little 5mm Allen right there. Go ahead and loosen that up. I did disconnect the battery on the motorcycle when I began this process. Anytime you're really servicing the electrical system like this, it's a good idea to just have the battery disconnected. Go ahead and thread that out. Let's take and put our ground lug in, like so. Make sure you have the two factory grounds that were under there. They need to remain connected, okay? Anytime you lose ground, it can really create an electrical nightmare, so just take a good look at it and make sure that you've got a good connection down there for the factory grounds as well. Snug that up. Next up is the neutral, right? The neutral connector, and that is once again found inside this hood. There's a lot of stuff going on right here. We need to install another Scotch lock right here on this blue wire. Go ahead and grab the Scotch lock, like so. Position the wire between it. They want you to, on the Bazzaz harness, plug in the white wire with the blue stripe. Last thing we need to do for this harness is we need to find a power source. They have recommended a wire back here at basically our brake light, which is something that we've got removed from the motorcycle now because this is a track-only bike. I'm going to go ahead and cut back the protective sheeting just a little bit so we can get a Scotch lock in here. It's recommending that we use the blue wire with the white stripe. Go ahead and move the unit out of the way so you can have a good look at this. Like so. Once again, repeat the process with the Scotch lock. Get the wire positioned in between. Squeeze down until we have good positive engagement. I'm going to go ahead and grab a pair of side cutters. Cut away the excess. Like so. Get the unit back up here in position. And let's connect the power wire for the unit. Okay, that concludes installing the fuel side harness. Okay, next up we're going to install the ignition harness. Look at the instructions. This is really pretty straightforward here. What we need to do is begin by plugging it in to the unit itself. We're going to route it down the right side of the bike this time. It's going to bend around the throttle bodies, pick a nice spot, feed it through there, and then we're going to connect all of the inline style connectors. Disconnect the coil, plug the harness side, the OE harness side into this connector, and then plug this one into the coil. They're all neatly lined up. This part is realistically pretty simple. Just pay attention to the routing down there and make sure you don't get any of them mixed up. It'd be kind of difficult to do because the harness really wouldn't route nicely if you did that. So here we go. We're going to plug it in back here, Bazzaz unit, and remember, route it down the right side of the motorcycle. Right, kind of spread it out nicely. This connector here is actually going to be for our quick shift sensor. Kind of pull that off to the side like so. Let's go ahead and begin disconnecting the coils and plugging this in. Remember, this goes to the factory side. Easy to do, positive engagement. Go ahead and connect this to the coil. We're going to repeat the process until we've completed it on each of the 4 coils. Our next step now is going to be installing the quick shift sensor on the shift rod. All right, here we go. Now we're going to install the Bazzaz quick shifter. For me, this is the most important part. This is my entire motivation behind this project, right? This is a push style sensor. They have push, they have pull. You just basically choose the kit that you want, you know, standard shift or reverse shift. I am a reverse shift or a GP shift rider, okay, so I need a push sensor with my rear set configuration. To upshift, I'm pushing down, thus the push style sensor. What we're going to do here is we're going to remove the factory rod, okay, I'm going to also remove the bolt here from the shift shaft adapter. We're going to be replacing the factory rod with a combination of the supplied rod and the shift sensor. Please note, this supplied rod is segmented, which means it can be cut down at any one of those segments to get the proper length. You can do it with a hacksaw, a tubing cutter, right? A cutoff wheel. There's a lot of different ways to do that, right? Easy to do. So what we're going to do now is remove our factory rod as well as the shift shaft adapter. Okay, I've got the quick shift sensor threaded onto the shift shaft adapter. I've also got that adjustable rod, remember that segmented rod, threaded onto the quick shift sensor. I bottomed them out and then I backed them off a little bit so we've got some room to play with, right? Now what we need to do is find the difference between the stock rod that I had on and the new pieces as assembled. We've got a difference of almost 2.5 inches. And we need to now cut the rod down accordingly. Remember, I'm trying to err to the side so I've got a little bit of room to work in either direction, right? So I'll leave myself a little bit of threaded area for additional adjustment. When we come back, I'll trim the rod and we'll be ready for final assembly. Okay, I've got the quick shift sensor mounted. We've trimmed the rod down. I've got plenty of adjustment left to move this up or down a little bit, and I remembered exactly where this lever was and I really duplicated that. So I've got it in the spot where it was before. I have room for adjustment. A couple of quick tips here. Number one, when you tighten up the shift sensor, okay, what I want to do is I want to make sure as the shift sensor is parallel to the sprocket cover, right, that this heim joint is floating dead in the center of its pivot, right? This is going to make sure that this shift sensor doesn't come in contact with that cover at all, which would result in a negative shift feel, right? May not shift properly at all if it does come in contact with that. So be cognizant of that. Tighten up your jam nuts by holding, of course, the rod with the 8mm wrench. Tighten that with a 10. Remember, you don't need to go crazy on that stuff. You want to get a reasonable amount of torque on it. Don't over torque it. Another key point is going to be when you're trimming this rod, you have to trim it so you have a nice flat surface for the jam nut to mount to. If you've cut it crooked, the jam nut is not going to get a good bite on that, and it's quite likely your shift rod will come loose. The best option to cut that is probably going to be a tubing cutter. That'll get you the straightest cut. I used a hacksaw. I'm comfortable with a hacksaw. I followed the lines. I got a nice straight cut. And then what I did is I used a sanding block. There was just a little burr on each side. Took a sanding block, removed the burr. I got a good flat surface, and I'm confident in the way that it's lined up that it's going to have a good bite on it. Okay, now we're going to install the self-mapping kit. A couple of things that we have to do to make this happen. First, on this bike, we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the stock air fuel sensor, okay? The Graves Link exhaust that we have on the bike, I mean, obviously Graves high performance stuff, they have provisions for both the stock air fuel sensor, which is clearly smaller in diameter than the aftermarket air fuel sensors are. So we remove that. The Graves Link exhaust comes with a plug that I've then installed in that bung. We're going to remove the plug for the larger of the two and then install this air fuel sensor. After we've installed this air fuel sensor, we will then plug it into the air fuel mapper controller, which will then hook up to the Bazzaz controller that's in the tail section of the motorcycle. Installation of this is really pretty straightforward. The first thing that I'm going to focus on is just the routing of the wiring. In order to facilitate it here, what I'm going to have to do is, it's a large connector, right? You need to thread that up in through there, like so, okay? Go ahead and pull it down around the engine case. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of just rotate the harness as I'm installing it into the exhaust. See how I kind of threaded that right through there and right past that last engine bolt. Go ahead and get the sensor threaded in there like so. Make sure the wiring harness is able to twist up here at the top. You don't want to damage the wires. Kind of rotate those along with the sensor itself. And once we're done with this, we'll go ahead and hook up the control unit. Okay, now we're back up top. It's time to plug the air fuel sensor, the Bazzaz air fuel sensor, into the air fuel mapper. Then we need to connect this to the control module. Pretty simple to do, right? Remember, we've got a lot, just a ton of wiring that needs to be rerouted, very carefully rerouted. So remember, it looks a little sloppy now. We're going to take our time and really tidy that up. Let's go ahead and begin by kind of picking a side. I'm going to have this run down the left side of the bike, plug it into the air fuel controller like so. The connector for the control module is right here, and they've got this sealed off the protective boot because remember, this is an optional piece that we're installing right now. Go ahead and plug that in like so. We've got one last piece. We're going to install on this bike the traction control switch, right? This is an adjustment knob, allows us to turn it off, +5, -5, or 0 settings, and we're able to switch from map 1 to map 2. In order to do that on this bike, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to run it from the left side of my controls, right, all the way back. The two connectors that we need to access are all the way in the tail section. What I'm going to begin by doing is just kind of roughly choosing a spot. I'm going to want to have it, remember I'm going to change the clip-ons and the triple tree. I'm going to want to have it over in this general area here. Need to disconnect that jumper. We're not going to use that because we do have a map switch. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. And then there is another connector for the traction control adjustment knob. There you go. We've got a little bit of work to do. We're going to take our time and really look at where each wire needs to go. One final thing that you're going to want to think about is how am I going to interface with the software, right? You're going to have your laptop. You have to have a USB cable connected to the controller. They supply a cable. It's right here. There's a couple of different ways to do this, right? You could take the cable, and if you have good access to this, you could plug it in and unplug it. What I'm going to want to do with this bike is I'm going to want to route this in such a way that I can access it easily, right? And I'm going to want to hook this to my controller, and I'm going to want to leave it hooked to the controller. So we're going to need to deal with this while we manage all the rest of the cables. Okay, that's it. We've got all the wiring secured. I've got the unit secured I have siliconed in my USB cable. I've also zip tied the USB cable to the ignition side of the harness for the Bazzaz unit. Just want to make sure it's not going to pull out of there. The silicone is just going to help keep it in place so it doesn't vibrate around a lot when you're riding. It could damage the terminal ends. I routed the USB cable all the way down to around the seat pan area. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to have this come out, but I want to make sure I can get to it really easily when I want to access it and hook up the laptop. As I put the bodywork back on the motorcycle, I'll make my final adjustments to this. I'll secure it somewhere in an area where I can either pull this trim panel off the side to access it or pull the tail back. I'm really leaning towards this trim panel right here, so I'm hoping that it'll fit nicely in this area right here. Beyond that, just take a look around. The use of the zip ties in the back, I've secured the unit, right, and you can see all the wiring here is secured all along both sides. Nothing is out of place, nothing is going to make any contact. And as I begin to reassemble the bike and put the fuel tank back on it, I'm going to take a good hard look as everything goes together and make sure there are no pinch points. We don't have any wires that are going to be rubbing anywhere against the frame or chafing through the insulation should it become an issue. We're going to do another video with the laptop on the bike. We'll run through the software and how to use it, how to set the bike up, so on and so forth. But I think we've covered the basics of the installation to give you an idea of what it takes to put this system on your bike. This is a very involved project. This is not a basic project. Leave yourself a lot of time because you really want to do a good, clean job. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section on our YouTube channel. We'll be happy to answer those for you. We think this is a really good kit, and I can't wait to get the bike out on the racetrack next Monday.